Matthew 17, but we're actually going to start over here in Exodus. So we're actually going to start in Exodus 24, verse 9. Oh man, I am not in the right place. There we go. Okay. Then Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel went up. So we're at Mount Sinai, and we've got 3 people going with Moses up onto the mountain. There's also the 70 others, which that's interesting, but we're not going to cover that right now. But yeah, okay, so they're going up, okay? And then Moses went up the mountain, okay, remember with these 3 guys, okay? And the cloud covered the mountain. Yahweh's glory settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. The 7th day, he called to Moses out of the middle of the cloud. The appearance of Yahweh's glory was like devouring fire on top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses entered into the middle of the cloud and went up on the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, so we've got some interesting things going on in this particular passage. We've got Moses with 3 people, also the 70 others that are there. And then he's going up on the mountain. There's this like 6-day waiting period. And then he's up there and Yahweh's glory is there in a cloud, in fire, in all this stuff. And then he's there for 40 days. Okay, so we're going to go from there. Okay, and we're going to jump over now to Exodus 32. It's been a little while, and now we're in 19. Moses has actually gone up and down a couple of times. It's this whole thing that's been going on. But as soon as he came near the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing. Remember, this is, if you haven't read this, you need to go read the rest of the story. But there's the whole passage where they make a golden calf, and now Israel is like, yeah, this is it. This is our gods, okay? So they're dancing. And Moses' anger grew hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them beneath the mountain. He took the calf which they had made and burned it with fire, ground it to powder, and scattered it on the water, and made the children of Israel drink it. So that's like, he's dealing with a problem, okay? He's dealing with a crazy problem here, all right? And then, a couple chapters later, this is in Exodus 34 now, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he's been up again, all right, with the 2 tablets of the covenant in Moses' hand, when he came down from the mountain, Moses didn't know that the skin of his face shone by reason of his speaking with him, that is God. When Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned to him, and Moses spoke with them. Afterward, all the children of Israel came near. Came near, and he gave them all the commandments that Yahweh had spoken with him on Mount Sinai. When Moses was done speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But when Moses went in before Yahweh to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. And when he came out and spoke with the children of Israel, that which he was commanded, the children of Israel saw Moses' face, that the skin of Moses' face shone, so that Moses put the veil on his face again until he went in to speak with him. It's God again, okay? So a little bit thing, okay? So that's Moses, and a small little snippets from his experience with Mount Sinai, okay? Now we're going to jump over to 1 Kings. This is chapter 19. Right. And we're picking up in the middle of the story because I just don't want to take all the time. Please feel free to go read these passages. Wow, my mouse is having trouble today. Okay. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he, this is Elijah, got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by the food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then the voice said to him, Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came, and go to this desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel Mahalath, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him." Okay, so there's a little snapshot from the very end of Elisha's, right? Because Elijah's thing. Okay, Elijah's reign as a prophet, right, in his time. And we have these similar things of like 40 days, going up on the mountain, doing all this kind of stuff, experiencing and talking with God and hearing from him, and a cloud, and all of this stuff that's going on with that. Okay, so this is background stuff that we should have in our heads as we are reading the New Testament. I don't. I just don't have this kind of stuff like always floating around in my head. But it is important to have the background stuff going on so that you can understand what's going on in the New Testament. Okay, so like this is important. All right, so now we're going to read forward. All right, so back to Matthew 17, finally, right? Okay. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, three people, and brought them up into a high mountain by themselves. He was changed, some say transfigured, before them. His face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as the light, like Moses. Behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Peter answered and said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you want, let us make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Okay? While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Behold, a voice came out of the cloud, saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." So we have Jesus going up onto the mountain. I guess a mountain, all right, a high mountain, right? And as we have seen already over and over again throughout Matthew, we have these tiebacks to the Old Testament again and again. We're going back. And here, these things at the Transfiguration, which quite frankly is incredibly odd, right? You read this as a kid, you read this as an adult, you read this and you're like, what? But knowing the Jewish background to this is pretty incredible. This is Jesus redoing things out of Israel's past, re-going through it, just like he went into the desert for 40 days to kind of reenact the 40 years of Israel in the wilderness, but this time to behave properly. So instead of saying, "God, why'd you bring us out here to die? We're starving." When Satan comes and says, "Hey, why don't you make some stones into bread?" Jesus is like, "No, I'm waiting for God to provide for me." So here too, we're going through this again. We're kind of reenacting, going through stuff again, but now even more so, because this is Jesus, and now Moses and Elijah, who both had these experiences on the mountain, are now with him, talking with him. And the cloud comes, God's presence, and speaks and repeats the words from Jesus' baptism, way back, I think it's chapter 3, right? Okay, way back, and now adds an extra verse about this thing of listen to him, which is coming out of Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy 18, Deuteronomy 18. Okay, starting in verse 15. Yes, I have this correct. Okay. "The Lord your God," this is Moses speaking at the end of his life, "will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. For this is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly when you said, 'Let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God or see this great fire anymore, or we will die.' So again, if you go back and read that, we already read the section where it talks about God's presence was looking like a consuming fire. But Israel was like, we don't want to deal with this. So can you just deal with it, please? So Moses says that's going to happen again. God's going to send another prophet. Okay? And so here we have in Matthew, God saying, yeah, here's this prophet. Listen to him. Okay? Right. When the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were very afraid. Not surprising. Jesus came and touched them and said, get up and don't be afraid. Lift your eyes. Lifting their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus alone. Okay, so this is a crazy experience. Again, without any kind of background, it's like, this is just madness. But seeing it in the context of the Jewish superstars who actually end up being there for it, it makes a little more sense. It makes a little more connection. It's not just this random thing that happened. It's showing us that that Jesus is in God's presence, that Jesus ultimately is God, that Jesus is greater than Moses and Elijah, that Jesus is the prophet that was foretold to come, who's going to make things make sense. Like all of this is here. It's so good. All right. So that's kind of cool. All right. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, don't tell anyone what you saw until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. They're like, risen from the dead. Okay. And in their paradigm, it's that's end times, right? Like at the end of all things, God's going to raise everybody and okay, cool. So I guess we're just not telling anybody for a long time. So, okay, that was kind of a thing. Why? Why is Jesus constantly being like, don't tell anybody these things? Don't tell anybody. His disciples asked him, saying, then why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? We're looking at all this stuff. Elijah was there. There's this random thing that people say that Elijah has to come first. And actually, if you ever do a Jewish Seder Passover meal, there's actually a spot for Elijah. They're waiting for him to come, right? So like this is cool. Like this is a big thing. Jesus answered them, Elijah indeed does come first and will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come and they didn't recognize him, but did to him everything they wanted to do. Even so, the Son of Man will also suffer by them. Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptizer, because we'd already had this conversation. Jesus had already said to the crowds, hey, who are you going out to see when you go to see John? Yeah, he's the one who's preparing the way, right? This is the whole thing. This has already been established. John is fulfilling the role of Elijah, preparing the way. But in Malachi, go back, read it, or go back to the previous video. There was the promise of Elijah's going to come back and he's going to make everything right again. He's going to bring families back together. He's going to do all that kind of stuff. Because if that doesn't happen, I'm going to destroy the land. And, the people killed John the Baptist. So what's going to happen to the land? Also, and Jesus is also going to get killed. Like he's doing this. Okay. When they came to the multitude, a man came to him, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is epileptic and suffers grievously, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, and they could not cure him. Jesus answered, faithless and perverse generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I bear with you? Bring him here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it went out of him, and the boy was cured from that hour. Doesn't this response seem kind of, I don't know, overmuch, like ridiculous? Like, wow, Jesus, like, do you need the snack that the angel gave to Elijah? Like, what are you doing, man? But if we put this in the context of Moses coming down the mountain, and there's the golden calf, because they've already lost faith in God and, this who's leading us. Like, the fire of God is still on the mountain, I believe. So, like, okay, whatever. All right, we don't know what happened to this Mosville. Jesus is going through this again now, coming down the mountain, and things are not right. His followers, whom he has given authority to do this, aren't able to do it. They aren't doing it. And he knows he's not staying here forever. So are you going to get this? And this is why also he's telling them, don't tell anybody what you saw, because you don't understand it yet. You don't understand what's going on. Once I'm risen from the dead and you guys have processed through this, you'll understand what was going on up there. But if you just start telling people things, you're going to have the wrong idea. So don't tell anybody. And are you guys ever going to figure this out? Are you guys ever going to learn what to do? Okay, so he cast out the demon. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately. Why weren't we able to cast it out? He said to them, because of your unbelief. For most certainly I tell you, if you have faith as a grain of a mustard seed, you will tell this mountain, move it from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. But this kind doesn't come out except by prayer and fasting. So, two things. The first one is that when Jesus says it's because of your unbelief, your lack of faith, as under other translations have it, he's not saying, hey, you guys are you're at like level 1 faith and you need to get to level 3 faith. He's not saying that. He's saying, because he immediately says, if you have faith like a mustard seed, then you could move mountains. So it's not about how much faith you have. It's not about how much belief, like you somehow get more and now you're able to do things. And when people are like, oh, well, you just don't have enough faith when you're praying or whatever. Faith is not this like manna thing that we use up in our prayer so that we can like make things happen. Instead, our faith is something where we are either trusting God or we're not. We have belief or we don't in what God is going to do. And they for whatever reason, they weren't believing it. So it's not like you got to level up. You got to muster up more. Mustard seed. You just need this much. You just need to have it. It just needs to be there. So it's not. Why is it not there? Okay? All right. Also, he says this kind doesn't come out except by prayer and fasting. Unless you have a more modern translation of the Bible, like my latest NIV Bible that I have, it moves this down. It had the fasting part in particular, and you can see the footnote right here. And it's right there. That footnote points out that the and fasting part, like, is that supposed to be here or not? And from a scholar that I've seen on the internet, so clearly this has got to be true, okay? I'll link the video in the description. He says, of all the areas where there is textual uncertainty in the New Testament, between, like, say, the Synoptic Gospels, where they see together, right, and there's some differences. Of the textual differences, this is the only one that actually has any significant, like, we don't actually know. Did Jesus say prayer and fasting? Did he say just prayer? So, when it comes to the certainty of what is the New Testament teaching us about Jesus, the kingdom of God, who Jesus is, what he did, how it worked, all of that is rock solid. The only thing that you might, be uncertain about is to cast out this kind of demon, must you also fast? That's it. So when you hear from other people that, oh my goodness, there's so many problems with the New Testament, we just don't know. This is it. This is the only thing where it's like unclear textually what exactly is going on. So do you need a fast or not if you're going to be casting out these kinds of demons? So if you get into that, you let me know what your experience is at that point in time. If you're already doing that kind of thing, leave a comment, I guess. That could be interesting. Okay. While they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and the third day he will be raised up. They were exceedingly sorry. So this is the second time that Jesus has predicted his death. And some people have pointed out that you don't need God goggles to see that you're going to go die. Why? Because Jesus knows that his plan is to walk into Jerusalem, go into the temple, and then start flipping tables. And of course, that's into where the Sadducees have all the power, and they have their little mafia. Remember, we've talked about this before. Go back. They have their little mafia, and the mafia, when you start flipping tables in their center of power, they don't take kindly to that, and they will kill you. Like, it is obvious. Jesus is like, I'm going to confront this, and I'm going to be killed. So you don't need to have supernatural knowledge to foresee that happening. And then that kind of gets conflated to like Jesus didn't have any supernatural foreknowledge, but he clearly says, I'm going to be raised up again 3 days later. So like, he does. Okay, like it is true that there are times when what Jesus says does not require some kind of supernatural insight, but then other things does. So don't get hung up on that. Okay. When they came to Capernaum, there were those who collected the didrachma coins, came to Peter and said, doesn't your teacher pay the didrachma? He said, yes. Okay, so it's easier in other translations. It's the temple tax. And originally it was, and I think it's in Exodus. No, I don't remember. Okay, it's established that you have to pay like a third of a shekel for every male so that you can like keep up the temple and all that kind of stuff. Like it's this whole thing. It can't be Exodus, Deuteronomy, whatever. Okay, getting sidetracked. And so there's this tax that's to do that. And by now we've had inflation, it looks like. So now you're paying for 2 days worth of work for it. So it's like 2 denarii. It's this thing. So like you have to pay that. And then one of the debates that was going on apparently during this time was whether you paid that once over the course of your life, or if you paid it like annually, or like what exactly happened. Okay, so Jesus has said things possibly that make people think that he's kind of negative toward this whole temple thing. And when he goes into the temple and starts flipping tables, I think they might have a different idea too there. Okay, so these are people who may be coming, trying to find out, like, hey, can we get dirt on Jesus? Like, is he against this? Okay, and by the way, they wouldn't force people who didn't have enough money. Like, theoretically, Jesus and his followers wouldn't have, because they're just wandering teachers, right? Like, okay, they wouldn't force them to pay. And it could be that Jesus had paid somewhere else. So they could have easily pled ignorance or they could have done whatever. But Peter's like, yeah, we totally do that. We don't actually know whether they had before or not. So like, it's unclear with this. Okay, so he's like, yeah, we're for the temple. Yeah, this is okay. When he came into the house, Jesus anticipated him, saying, he was the first to speak, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth receive toll or tribute? From children or from strangers?" Peter said, "From strangers?" Right, okay. So Peter's like, yeah, we totally pay that. Jesus is like, should we have to pay that? Because I'm the Son of God. You said so yourself, and I agreed with you. So do I need to pay for the upkeep of the temple, or is that for other people? Peter's like, other people? So like Peter's in a rough spot right here of like, and Jesus said, oh here, there's the footnote. Okay. Jesus said to him, "Therefore, the children are exempt, but lest we cause them to stumble, go to the sea, cast a hook, take up the first fish that comes up. When you have opened its mouth, you will find a stater coin. Take that and give it to them for me and you." So Jesus is like, technically, I don't have to pay this. I don't have to pay this tax. I am part of God's family. I don't have to pay this. And Christians also then are pulled into Christ's family, right? We're pulled in as well. And so we don't have to pay this tax. And so, early Christians could be like, well, look at that. We're not paying for this. Okay. Also, by the way, to further make this interesting, in 70 AD, after they destroy the temple, the Romans also start stealing this tax and using it to pay for pagan temples, which some Jews would be like, no, we're not paying this anymore. And other Jews are like, but God commanded it, so like we're going to keep doing it, right? Like the tension is high with this one. Like it's very interesting how complex stuff can be with this stuff, right? But Jesus is like, hey, yeah, we don't need to offend anybody with this. So Peter goes and fishes with a line, which apparently this is like the one time where Peter does not fish with a net, which is for gathering a lot of fish. He just goes with a single line to get a fish, and he gets the first one. And then inside is this coin that has enough that's worth enough to pay for both Jesus and his taxes for the temple. Like it's right there. Okay, so there actually are fish in the Sea of Galilee that do go and do some bottom feeding and will eat up shiny things. And you actually can have fish that have things in them. And there are stories from around this time. We don't know if they predate this, like when this was written, or if they come after. But if it was before, then this would be a potentially well-known thing. There's lots of Jewish stories about people finding gems and other stuff inside of fish to show that God cares for them and is taking care of them. And so if that is a story that is well known by Peter, then, but the fact that it happens to him is like super cool, right? Like, wow, God really takes care of me. Also, by the way, yeah, you don't need God goggles to know that Jesus is going to walk into a temple and get himself killed for doing stuff like flipping tables. But you kind of do have to have some kind of supernatural knowledge to know that you can send someone to go fish and that the first fish that they catch is going to have a coin of a certain amount inside of its mouth. So, like, that's a thing that happens. Okay, so that's some of the stuff that's going on here. This was a lot. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you found something particularly interesting, please leave a note down below. And yeah, had you made these connections to the Old Testament, bringing it forward into the New Testament with this Transfiguration thing? Had you ever encountered anything, or were you just like, this is weird? Let me know in the comments as well. All right, thanks for watching.